Hello everyone. My name is Art Russell. Welcome to my channel. This video is about fear and enlightenment, but I'd like to admit something up front. If you're seeking a neatly packaged video with special effects and graphics, that's something that I can't offer you in this video. I'm hoping, however, that the content that I share will help alleviate some of the suffering that's related to the human perspective. So a little bit about me. As a young child, I was very familiar with fear. I was a very shy child, which meant a fearful child. I was afraid when people that I didn't know came to visit. I was afraid of going to public school, afraid of being accepted, afraid of going to high school. I was fortunate that I wasn't fearful of my family. I had a very loving family, so that was definitely a plus. There was no question of abuse or anything that way. It's just that fear seemed to be a common part of my nature. And then when I was 16, there was the sudden passing of my father. And that, as you can imagine, raised a lot of fear. How was our family going to manage? How would we get by? Would I be able to be enough as this teenager to be of much help? And then in my later teenage years, there was fear related to finding a career. Then there was fear when I did go to college to become a paramedic. And then the first couple of years on the job, as you might imagine, were very fearful, especially because it wasn't a passion for me. It was a career that I thought had tremendous value because we're at least helping others. But I was fearful about being enough. Then fear struck big time in the fall of 2006, when my 20-year marriage suddenly ended. I didn't see this coming, and I'm not complaining, I don't mean it that way, but I need to relate some of these details related to this character, Art Russell, to make the point of this video, especially about enlightenment. So it was soon after either the fall of 2007 or the spring of 2008 that I went into a bookstore and found this book entitled The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I took it home that day and began to read. And I'll just paraphrase some of the beginning parts of this book. In the first few pages, he relates how until the age of 29, he was suicidally depressed. He held great anxiety about himself, and I think he had a very, very busy mind, which is the case with my character too at one time. Worrying. We think it has value, but really, does it? It's been my experience that it doesn't. Worry and planning are very different. Anyway, he tells how on the night of his 29th birthday, or soon after, he was lying in bed at night and he had this thought repeat through his mind. Here it is. I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly I became aware of what a peculiar thought it was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me. The I and the self that I cannot live with. maybe, I thought, only one of them is real. Now, when I was reading the book for the first time, that really struck with me because I thought, that makes sense. Even the sentence, I can't stand the thought of living with myself, does imply two. One is the real, the I am awareness, and the other is the concept that you hold of yourself. Now, most of us are unintentionally living from the conceptual self, and that's where the fear resides. Anyway, Eckhart Tolle goes on to explain that he felt drawn into a void or a vortex, and he felt these words about resist nothing repeat in his mind in the wee hours of that same night. And when he wakened up in the morning, everything felt different to him. I'll find a passage here that describes it. Okay, here he says, for the next 5 months after that morning in which he wakened to a feeling of great peace and joy, I lived in a state of uninterrupted deep peace and bliss. After that, it diminished somewhat in intensity, or perhaps it just seemed to because it became my natural state. I could still function in the world, although I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I already had. I knew, of course, that something profoundly significant had happened to me, but I didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years later, after I had read spiritual texts and spent time with spiritual teachers, that I realized that what everybody was looking for had already happened to me. So what he's relating is that on that night when that thought, I can't stand the thought of living with myself any longer, when that occurred, there was a disidentification that happened, consciousness, which is primary, to the objective body-mind. So he realized that awareness realized that he was not the body-mind. Now this is totally different than what our conditioning tells us. As I've mentioned in other videos, from a very young age we're told our name, Bobby or Susie or whatever name it is. Then we get to know we have our birthdays. We know we're a boy or a girl. We know finally that our nationality and our culture and all these other definitions that are added to I am. Now the kicker is we've lost conscious awareness of I am. Just I am. So everywhere we go, we carry this bundle, this great big sack of beliefs that reinforce we have to carry all of we like to carry the prideful events, like, oh yeah, I did that, that was me. And we don't like to carry the shameful events, so we suppress those. But they're still in the bag. We just don't look at them. So let's share a little bit about enlightenment. I've mentioned this before, but in another video, but in 2017, I was meditating. I'd had a long practice with that to deal with, I'll be honest, it was a gut issue, IBS. And it would flare up at times, and a lot of people thought it was due to my career, all the stress of that. And so I got into meditation as a way of calming this this body-mind. And some of that worked a little, but the good news is I would say that by the law of attraction, I was able to attract a means of getting rid of that, which was getting rid of mercury fillings. Again, something that I didn't know anything about, but in 2011, I found out about the nature of those fillings and I had them removed, and I've now been 15 years without IBS. So, about enlightenment. 2017, and I realized that during some of my 20-minute daily meditations, I was having tears. And they would just roll down, and it wasn't that I was so depressed at all. It was, in fact, they felt good, but I didn't know what was happening. And as it turned out, that was, you can't really say it in terms of time, but from the human perspective, we speak of time. It was the beginning of the path to enlightenment. So what does enlightenment mean? It means to awaken from the dream of personhood. Now, I know that sounds wacky. It sounds like dream of personhood. No. The bulk of society believes that they are persons in the apparent world. So now I'd like to share another passage from page 198 of The Power of Now that points to this, and that's why I'm sharing it. Now, in my first few reads of this book, I didn't see this, but I'm pointing it out to you with the hopes that it will be helpful. Perhaps it will stir you to step upon the path of self-inquiry. Ask yourself, who am I really? Here's the quote. Remember that your perception of the world is a reflection of your state of consciousness. You are not separate from it, and there is no objective world out there. Every moment, your consciousness creates the world that you inhabit. There is no world out there, independent of your consciousness of it. Paramahansa Yogananda, in a small law of attraction book called The Law of Success, stated, "Mind is the creator of everything." Does this help to explain the law of attraction, how changing your thoughts could change your apparent reality? In a dream state dream, you assume the role of a character within that dream. You might be traveling across the desert on a camel or sailing a great sea, and it all seems real as real can be until you wake up or merge with the waking state. Now, what the majority of beings do at that point is to assume, oh, this is real. This is terra firma. This is Earth. This is what's real, pal. The idea of you, of yourself, the egoic self, is the fearful position. When you recognize yourself as consciousness, you realize that anything that's occurring, either something labeled positive or negative, is occurring within God's infinite living dream. But that your nature is of the same nature as God's. Christianity states it as the Father and I are one. The same nature. Brahman and Atma are one. One consciousness in which everything arises. I hope that this has given you something to contemplate deeply today. If you're curious about investigating your true nature, I hope you'll watch a video that I'm going to put on a card at the end of this video about cloud bursting. It's something that I discovered several years ago, and it helps keep me anchored in reality. We normally don't think that we can influence our apparent reality outside of us. And by this, I'm not saying that we can leap off a balcony and that gravity will not take the person to the ground. It will. I'm not saying that. But cloud bursting, which I was first introduced through a video of Bob Proctor, has been a reliable anchor point of understanding about the nature of this reality. We can also think again of the verse from Acts chapter 17, verse 28. For in him we live and move and have our being. In him, consciousness, or God, or source, or universe. I hope this video has been helpful or useful. I invite you to share, subscribe, and like. More information is available through my free articles at thinktwice.me and also through my book entitled This Taste of Flesh and Bones, available from Amazon. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing all of you again soon. Bye for now.